The Lodge. The podcast from the Grand Lodge of British Freemasonry in Germany. Welcome to The Lodge. And welcome back to The Lodge, the podcast from the Grand Lodge of British Freemasonry in Germany. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Brother Manuel, and today Brother Ray is joining me to talk about the history of the Grand Lodge. So Ray, welcome, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Manuel. Pleasure to be with you.
So Ray, where are you from, if I may ask you?
I am originally from UK. I am now a British and German citizen, and I've lived in Germany for the better part of getting on for about 15, 20 years now.
Oh, that's great. And were you a Freemason when you came to Germany, or did you get initiated here?
I was a Freemason. I was initiated in a lodge in London, and I am under the Metropolitan Grand Lodge in London. And it is a military lodge, which is of relevance to today's conversation.
Oh, but that's interesting. What does it mean? I mean, do you have to be part of a regiment to be part of that lodge in particular?
Originally, but as we will discuss later, Freemasonry evolves. My lodge was originally created by RAF officers in 1944, and it changed to become available to all members of the Royal Air Force and supporting cadet forces, volunteers, etc. And now we've evolved that we will take absolutely anybody, provided they meet our requirements and they are comfortable with us. So, yeah, it's interesting. We have a lodge history, as every lodge does have.
Exactly, that's true.
Yeah.
And talking about history, and let's dive into the history of the Grand Lodge of British Freemasonry in Germany.
Okay.
Why do we have a British Freemasonry Grand Lodge in Germany and not just a German Grand Lodge to which we're all part?
Absolutely cracking question. I think the first thing you need to do is probably go back to 1945. So in 1945, the Allied powers within Europe, one of the Allied powers was Britain, and the UK set up what became known as the British Army of the Rhine, and that was formed in August 1945. Now, by definition, there were a large number of soldiers, there were a large number of RAF personnel and supporting civilian staff. Amongst those were a number of Freemasons, and they were predominantly Freemasons from the home United Grand Lodges of England, Scotland, and Ireland. So they wished to create British Freemasonry or practice British Freemasonry in Germany and have lodges where they could use British ritual within Germany. So that was where the demand came from, was a desire to have British Freemasonry practiced in Germany by predominantly British Freemasons. And if you look at the underlying reasons for that, yes, they could have joined German lodges, but how many British soldiers basically spoke German at that time? How many understood German customs and habits? How many would feel comfortable in a German lodge where arguably the ritual would be completely alien so there's a number of factors there. The other side of it is the way that the organizations are set up. There is a difference between Freemasonry, certainly in England, in my experience, the structure of it, where there is a United Grand Lodge, and under that are provincial Grand Lodges, which are geographically bound. In Germany, currently, there are 5 Grand Lodges under the United Grand Lodges of Germany, and they have no geographic boundaries. The largest, the Grand Lodge AF and AM, decides to subdivide Germany into districts, but they are still all under the same Grand Lodge AF and AM. Certainly the the Grand Lodge, British Freemasonry in Germany, knows no geographic boundary within Germany, and it has lodges from Hamburg down to Munich and from Berlin to Mönchengladbach. So it's all over Germany. You'll have to excuse my cat, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. He can join us in the conversation about history of the Grand Lodge.
Sorry, he just popped up and making a noise. Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, there we are. There were a number of drivers, and there were a number of barriers to why British Freemasonry could not be practiced in Germany at the time.
That's right, and so it would be correct to assume that the first lodges were military lodges in the Grand Lodge of British Freemasonry. Is that correct? Or not?
Well, yes, absolutely correct. Amongst the first, as an example, was the Star of Saxony. And the Star of Saxony is in Rheindahlen. It was consecrated at Royal Air Force Station Jever, predominantly to serve the Royal Air Force population in Jever. But when Jever closed down, it moved down to Rheindahlen. So, yes, its catchment area, if you wish, would be specific RAF stations, specific army regiments. I was reading one earlier where they were talking about one lodge which was created by the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers.
Oh,
so yes, they were predominantly driven by the military, but then again, the military and Freemasonry go back a very, very long way. In fact, it goes back probably to the origins of Freemasonry. I can certainly trace it back to the origins of English Freemasonry for a start. I can trace back to a military connection,
right?
Which is no surprise.
No, and also, like, how must have been the life for those lodges right after the Second World War? Because many of them, I assume, they would end up being deployed in the occupied sectors of Germany. How was the life at the beginning, the late 40s and early 50s?
I've got no I'm old, but I'm not that old. I've got no first-hand experience of that, but I can imagine it was not very pleasant. Certainly at that period, the military governments and the administrations were there to manage basically Germany as a country. So that was seen as a temporary basis, and they would leave. If you move on slightly until 1949, as an example, when the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was set up, the three or four of the original powers in Germany, America, Britain, Canada, and France, became founder members. Yeah. The Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, became a member in 1955. So the whole of the military within Germany changed from being basically an army of occupation to an active partner in the defense of the West against the threats seen from the Soviet bloc. So it became more long-term. What were temporary barracks and temporary airfields now became permanent garrisons and, strategic airfields supporting NATO throughout the whole of the Cold War period. Now, with that came more stability. With that came families and married quarters, and people were actually living in Germany and contributing certainly to the German economy. But with that, they were also part of society, but outside society, because mainly from language barrier. But again, from that, the British military always had a range of activities that kept people busy when they weren't actively engaged in some form of warfare or training, whether it was a golf course, whether it was football matches, or even Freemasonry. So it was part of the culture, is part of the culture.
Yeah, somehow life has to continue. You know, one has to feel the continuance of life, that it's not only just work in a hostile environment where everything's changing, despite the war having ended, but a lot of things have to move forward.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So it did take some time. So 1955 was basically the seed change from an occupying power to an active partner in support of NATO's ambitions. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't very long after that, it was just over a year later, that the United Grand Lodge of England formally recognised the United Grand Lodges of Germany. So everything within Freemason relies on mutual recognition and fraternal harmony. During the First World War in 1916, the United Grand Lodges of England broke off recognition with the Grand Lodges, or the equivalent of the Grand Lodges in Germany. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't re-established until 40 years later.
Wow.
Now, under those terms, no British Freemason was allowed to visit a German lodge. Mm-hmm. And despite numerous petitions to the home Grand Lodges, they were always met with a rebuffal. No, you cannot attend German lodge meetings, and no, you cannot create British lodges within Germany. And at the end of that, when there was mutual recognition of fraternal harmony, that's when the British were enabled then to open lodges under the United Grand Lodges of Germany. So they are German lodges working an English ritual.
Wow. So an emulation ritual, for example.
It is, with the exception of the Thistle and Saltire, yes, it is emulation, but at the time it was called Nigerian ritual. But that's a separate story.
So we are in 1954, we're in the mid-50s, and finally the United Grand Lodge of England has recognized Germany as a Grand Lodge. So when do we, as a Grand Lodge of British Freemasonry in Germany, come to a hold and under the banner of the Grand Lodge of Germany?
Okay, well that's interesting. So the first point is that the United Grand Lodge of what was Ancient Free and Accepted Masons, AF and AM, right, allowed the consecration of the first of what is now the British lodges in March 1957. This was New Absalom Lodge, number 841, and it was under the British Lodge district of AF and AM. As I said earlier, AF and AM have various divide Germany into districts, and at the time there were two districts that were outside geographic boundaries. There was the British Lodge district, which covered everywhere from Hamburg down to Cologne and Dusseldorf and right the way up to Herford and Zust and places like that. And there was the American-Canadian Lodge district under AF and AM. And the American-Canadian was by far the biggest district under AF and AM. So we're seeing now the consecration of a number of lodges under the British Lodge district under AF and AM. And you see in 1957, 4 lodges were consecrated. I've already mentioned New Absalon. Saxony was consecrated a couple of months later. And then in June, Britannia Lodge was consecrated in Hereford. In November, Phoenix Lodge was consecrated. So there, now you're seeing more and more lodges being consecrated under AF&AM. In 58, as an example, Anglo-Hanseatic Lodge was consecrated. And later in 58, Star of Saxony, my own lodge in Germany, was also consecrated. So that's where things got to. And it's the British lodges, those British lodges, stayed under the British Lodge District of AF&AM from 1957 to 1962. And in 1962, what was the Lodge District was titled a Provincial Grand Lodge under the United Grand Lodges of Germany. So this is the first instance where it is termed as being a Grand Lodge.
What does it mean? Sorry. What does it mean to be a provincial Grand Lodge? What is the difference with a district and provincial?
I think I'm certain I'm also correct as well. If I were to talk about Canadian Grand Lodge, provincial Grand Lodges as well, certainly under the English Constitution, there are provincial Grand Lodges. Those provincial Grand Lodges are bounded by geography. So in UK, you will see, as an example, the Grand Lodge of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight will cover the whole of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. The Metropolitan Grand Lodge covers 10-mile radius of Great Queen Street in London. So if you live or work within the 10-mile radius of Great Queen Street, you would have no problem becoming a member of the Metropolitan Grand Lodge. And I understand, talking to Canadian colleagues, Canada works under a similar principle where there are provincial Grand Lodges right the way across Canada. So what you're seeing is a difference in German and British organisations, that if you exclude the British and the American Canadian Grand Lodges from this, the 3 remaining German Grand Lodges cover the whole of Germany. There's nothing provincial about them. They cover the whole of Germany. And how they manage Germany, as I say, with AF&AM choose to manage it on a district basis. So there are a number of lodges in a geographic area that are within that district. Yeah?
Yeah.
Which is basically, you could call it the equivalent of a provincial area. But it's not called... In Germany, they are all under AF&AM. In England, they are under the United Grand Lodges of England as provincial Grand Lodges in their own right. So they are a Grand Lodge, and I dare anybody to go and tell somebody in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight that the province of Hampshire and Isle of Wight is not a Grand Lodge in its own right. I don't think you'd last very long. So from that point of view, the provincial Grand Lodge under AF&AM, under the United Grand Lodges of Germany, existed from 1962 to 1971. And that in its own right enabled them to consecrate a further 5 lodges across Germany. So we moved to the 1970s. In 1971, there was a change of name again, and this was to align with the two of the major lodges within Germany, the 2 other Grand Lodges that had land in the title. So now you see the name is being changed to the Grand Land Lodge of British Freemasonry in Germany, from British Freemasons in Germany, under the United Grand Lodges of Germany. And then they went on, consecrated another 3 lodges. And then in 1980, again, there was the penultimate change, where it became the Grand Lodge of British Freemasons in Germany, within the United Grand Lodges of Germany. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, and then there's a very, very subtle change in title here. So this is what we're now talking about, the Grand Lodge of British Freemasons in Germany. And then in 2022, it changed its title to the Grand Lodge of British Freemasonry in Germany, within the United Grand Lodges of Germany. So it now more accurately reflects the situation. It is a Grand Lodge practicing British Freemasonry in Germany. And there must have been a time, sometime in the past, where there was a crossover point where there were less British Freemasons in Germany. So those who were initiated under a home constitution and came to serve their military service in Germany, and those who were initiated into Freemasonry in a British lodge in Germany, who by definition then become German Masons, because they are initiated under the German constitution.
That is true. And going back a little bit, it has to do with this, but getting up to the 80s and the change of names, of titles of the Grand Lodge, as you have mentioned, it seems that those changes go hand in hand with with a country that becomes more and more stable as well.
Yes, I would say so. I mean, certainly in my experience from the 1970s, certainly up to the modern day, Germany is still the powerhouse of Europe. It's certainly, in my opinion, it is certainly the most progressive, most productive country in Europe. And that is obviously part of the culture, and with that you've seen this growth of Freemasonry, because it is part of the German culture, and it is part of the British culture, obviously.
And were there any attempts? I mean, of course, they were on the other side of the Berlin Wall, but after the fall of the wall, and we'll get there in a minute, were there any intents to open lodges on the Eastern Bloc?
That's a very interesting point. It's a subject that I would like to explore more thoroughly. It was based on a chance conversation I had in a chapter meeting in Dresden with a young man who had grown up under the DDR regime, and it's something that I would love to research, because it's part of the jigsaw of the history of Freemasonry in Germany. Yeah. So at the moment, I really couldn't comment on that.
That's all right. But also the geography of our lodges, the distribution of our lodges in Germany, also tells a story that there's a super cluster in the area of the Rhine, and then it starts to open up a little bit and spread a bit more when you go into the south and the east and the north.
Yeah. This is perfectly logical, because it was driven predominantly by the need of British Freemasons in the British military.
Yeah.
It all existed within what was called the British sector of Germany, and that British sector is basically anywhere from, where do you want to go from the Dutch border right the way through up to Hanover and just about beyond, I should think, probably right the way up to Celle. There was a lot of stuff certainly around Hamburg, which is not surprising. The Americans and Canadians were obviously further down south. So what you could do is, if you were to take a map of the British sector and say where all these lodges were or where they were consecrated, Munster, Zost, Osnabrück, Dusseldorf, Paderborn, Hereford. It's all within the British sector, and you're absolutely correct. We're seeing now. I'll pick on one as an example, one or two as an example. You've got Corinthian Lodge, which was consecrated in Frankfurt am Main, well outside the British sector. The one before that in 2013, Kurt Tucholsky Lodge was consecrated, and it meets in Una, which technically is in the British sector, but it was not meeting any British military requirement.
Yeah.
Southern Star is down in Munich, nowhere near the British sector. So, if you're absolutely correct. What existed as the British area, and Freemason was meeting a need within the British area, and it's hardly surprising.
Yeah, but it's amazing how it tells a story as well. And as we are close there, after the Berlin Wall fell, there was no much need for the British Army to have a presence in Germany as it was before. It was the end of the Cold War. What happened to many lodges in the early 90s and then beginning into the 2000s? Did they take a hit from their numbers from brethren, or everything just kept the same, stayed the same?
You see a drawdown of British troops certainly from the fall of the wall, from the early 90s onwards, which you would expect. With that, you lost a number of active Masons as they went back to UK or left the army, whichever, or left the military, whichever way you look at it. But it also removed the recruiting base, because you would look to recruit from within your known base. So if you were working alongside somebody and you got speaking to them about Freemasonry, you could then encourage them, and they could then become an initiate within the lodge. Not specifically with just the military, but as more and more people in the British military were working alongside Germans and other nationalities, you were seeing a number of Germans joining British lodges. In fact, Star of Saxony still has a number of German members who joined the lodge when they were working for the British Army or supporting the British Army in Germany. So as the numbers decline with the drawdown, you're seeing an awful lot of lodges under pressure to recruit. You're seeing an awful lot of people going back to UK. They may still be subscribing members, but it's very, very difficult to turn up for a lodge meeting. Pre-COVID, as an example, Star of Saxony was seeing a large number of people from UK travelling to Germany purely for the installation meeting, which was a great sight. COVID has curtailed that. We're all getting older, so those who went back to UK are now probably in the late 60s, early 70s, possibly in their 80s, and find it increasingly more difficult to travel. So the lodges now have got to look across a wider area to recruit new candidates.
Yeah, and also to open up to the ideas, I guess it would have been similar in some cases as it was in Argentina, where I was initiated. But there was a clash between the older brethren and the slightly younger who were seeing fit the need to open up on a website, for example, or start finding recruitment, new recruits or new candidates through the internet and trying to put it out there. So that was a bit of a clash, well, and I suppose it must have happened at some point in the last 25 years.
Yeah, I'm absolutely correct. And certainly, if you go on the Grand Lodge of British Freemasonry website, there is a section that says, "What is Freemasonry? Mm-hmm. What should a candidate know?" So that is a way of encouraging people or satisfying knowledge. And certainly, if you were to go on the United Grand Lodges of Germany's website, it will give you an explanation there. Now, whether that is marketing or whether that is just stating a matter of fact, is open to interpretation. You're absolutely correct. There has been a huge amount of progress. I can only talk about England in this respect. An awful lot of effort by the United Grand Lodge of England to be more open, be more frank with people, to move away from the idea that Freemasonry is a secret society. No, it's not. It is a society with secrets, and those secrets are basically what goes on in the rituals. Yeah, so it's a very, very subtle change in language, but certainly if you were to go into Great Queen Street and you were to go into Freemasons Hall, the place is open. You can wander around. You can walk around the library. You can certainly walk around all the exhibition areas. There are daily tours or tours more than once a day around the Grand Temple and things like that. It's Freemasonry is now opening out to the world in England.
Yeah,
and with that, it then permeates down from there down to initiatives within the provincial Grand Lodges, because Freemasonry if Freemasonry doesn't evolve, Freemasonry will die.
That's correct. Yeah, that is true. Yeah. It has to change with the times, as we have done it before. We have to keep doing it. And as we are in present times, COVID took a hit on everything in life, and Freemasonry didn't escape to that. And we are now slowly coming back, the lodges from the Grand Lodge to, but I must say, and I would like to know your opinion of how things are coming back to normal after what has happened in the last 4 years.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So within Germany, which is a parallel with my English lodge, I'm as an experienced and perhaps aged Freemason, I'm absolutely delighted with the activities that go on within Star of Saxony. We have recruited young Masons or younger Masons. They've been initiated within the lodge. There are two that I can think of who are German, one who is Irish from the Republic of Ireland, and they are turning into being absolutely superb Masons. The ritual, the way they behave is absolutely fantastic. And I am really looking forward to seeing each one of them going through the chair. It's the same in UK. We've been very, very well blessed that we have attracted some very, very young Masons, and we can see them developing into being very, very good at ritual, very, very good throughout the lodge offices. So it's I suppose the answer is, to be successful, the lodge has got to put an awful lot of effort in. And I'm very, very glad to say the two lodges that I know about and I care about are very, very successful because they put the effort in. They've gone out actively recruiting, and the quality of people that they've brought in has been generally very, very good.
That's true, and something that many times people overlook when thinking about joining Freemasonry is the hard work that you have to put almost every day for keeping your lodge alive. It's so much work, and you can see it over time that even if you get used to it, it's still an awful lot, but you do it with such a pleasure because you can see how the lodge vibrates and shines because of that work that you put in. But it's an awful lot of work, as you say.
It's an awful lot of work, but it's huge. It's hugely satisfying. If you, for many years within Star of Saxony, and elsewhere, I was a director of ceremonies, and it's lovely to sit there and watch every individual officer perform his role within the lodge absolutely flawlessly, and you can literally go out, the procession, everybody goes out, and I'm stood down punching the air saying, yes, that was a great meeting. Well done.
And that's a great feeling, isn't it?
Absolutely fantastic feeling. Fantastic feeling.
Brother Ray, I want to thank you very much for taking time of talking to me and sharing all this knowledge about our Grand Lodge and the history. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Manuel. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Very much. And thank you everyone who has tuned in, and we'll see you next time. The Lodge. The podcast from the Grand Lodge of British Freemasonry in Germany. See you soon.